last few weeks, I binged the entire Evil Dead franchise for the very first time in preparation for Evil Dead Rise. So in this video, I'm going to sit down to rank all 5 movies in the Evil Dead franchise. Before I get into my ranking, let me know your ranking of all 5 of these movies in the comments down below. And if you're new here and you enjoy all my movie and TV show reviews, reactions, and breakdowns, make sure to subscribe by notification on so you don't miss any type of video or go live. But wasting any more time, let's get right into it. So starting off the list for me, in 5th place is Evil Dead 2013 at a 6.5 out of 10. In my opinion, yes, it does have some of the best gore of the franchise, especially that very iconic shot near the end of the movie where she's basically chainsawing the person's head and it's just raining blood.
Fix on this motherfucker!
That shot is absolutely amazing, and it just has some of the most gory moments of the entire franchise. But story-wise, this movie never seemed to captivate me in any way. None of the main characters, none of the lore introduction, none of it really made me feel invested in these specific groups of characters and this specific story that they were trying to tell. I'll talk about another movie in this franchise that introduces new characters and does an amazing job with them, but this movie just never really seemed to captivate me in any way, so that inherently puts it in last place for me. With that being said, in 4th place is the original The Evil Dead, coming in at a 7 out of 10. In my opinion, this is an absolutely amazing start to the franchise, and though this is probably my hottest take of the video, I know a lot of people think it's arguably the best of the franchise, I still think it's a pretty good movie. I just don't think it's as insane as the rest, but I think they did a great job introducing the lore, introducing Ash.
Why are you torturing me like this? Why?
Introducing just in general the characters. I think they did a great job with all of the setup stuff, but I just wasn't really invested in the story, or I guess even the campiness at the time.
We're gonna get you. We're gonna get you.
As someone who watched the franchise for the very first time starting in 2023, I just think I had a different lens going into the campiness of it all, and this movie does a great job of just being full-on camp, weirdo, stupid sometimes, and I enjoyed that, but I just never felt like there was any sort of purpose to it, whereas even the final 2 movies in the original trilogy and Evil Dead Rise, they do a decent job of at least having campy moments, having these weird, creative, stupid camera angles and tricks or whatever it may be, but also still having me invested in it. This movie did all of the campy stuff, did all of the weird, cool camera tricks, but it never really had me super invested in it all. And again, it's just the introduction, it's just laying the groundwork, but I think it speaks more to the other movies that I have them higher on this list because it uses all the amazing groundwork that this movie lays and just builds upon it all the time. Moving up the list though, in 3rd place for me is the newly released Evil Dead Rise, also coming in at a 7 out of 10. This one could bump up to 7.2, 7.5. I definitely think it is better than the original Evil Dead. Again, this is probably a massive hot take. None of you guys will probably agree with this, but the main reason why I love this movie so much, and again, might just be recency bias, but this is the movie where I felt most invested in the characters, at least from introducing a new set of characters.
Open up now.
You don't look so good, Mom.
We had a new set of characters introduced in Evil Dead 2013, and then technically The Evil Dead, the very first one, and now Evil Dead Rise. Even in the original Evil Dead movie, I wasn't as invested in any of the characters. This movie instantly builds a connection to every single one of the characters. I personally loved all of the character work. All of the acting is also great. A lot of times, horror movies, you have 1 or 2 performances and you just feel like they're overdoing it, but this movie balances all of those elements very, very well. I was truly invested in who was gonna live and who was gonna die, and there won't be any spoilers here, but I absolutely love who they choose to kill off, who they choose to leave surviving at the end, just the general direction of this story, how everything plays out. It's just so entertaining, and again, it's just so immersive as well in this world of Evil Dead, where they could just do some cliche thing to bring back this evil deity. Like, they could pull some crazy coincidental strings here and there to make all of this story happen, but it feels worth it. And I feel like that's really difficult to do, especially something where it's like you're in a book and you say something and then it happens. I think, again, everything just pays off. I didn't do a full review of Evil Dead Rise here on the channel, but I did want to say the final 15 15-ish minutes of this movie are some of the most Evil Dead ever. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you think about Evil Dead and you automatically think about just super creative camera work, a lot of blood, and just a lot of screaming zombie demon things. And that's exactly what this movie delivers. I think it did overhype itself on the gore element of it all, especially like the cheese grater scene. And I wish we had more of like just raw, gory stuff. Like, obviously in the last 15 minutes, you get some crazy amounts of blood and gore and insane chainsaw action and insane music cues that take you back to the other Evil Dead movies. You have all of those amazing elements in the end of the movie, but just throughout the majority of the runtime, you don't really get that gore. Whereas I feel like in the next two movies, at least, it's very well spread out. You have these insane, crazy things happening throughout the movie, where again, Evil Dead Rise, it just feels like they throw them in near the end. I do feel like it kind of makes all of it worth it though, at least within the movie itself. It really builds up the whole demonic element of it, and it builds up the gore to more and more and more. But again, I just feel like the trailers and all of the people talking about the movie, a lot of people hyped it up to be a lot more gory than it actually was. Next up on the list though, in second place for me, is Army of Darkness at an 8 out of 10. This movie is definitely the most different of the entire franchise. And I wrote this in my notes. I don't know if this is going to make any sense to you guys, but I love that this movie feels like a fantasy movie, but not fantastical. Again, that probably doesn't make any sense, but when I think of fantastical, I think about kind of the end of Evil Dead 2, where Ash gets spun into like the vortex and he gets transported back in time. That feels more fantastical to me. But when I talk about fantasy, I'm talking about kingdoms, I guess more of medieval times and stuff like that. I just really love that they build us into this world that is so different than what the first two movies are, yet I'm instantly so captivated by transporting into this medieval world and Ash becoming such a big figure in that world.
This is my boomstick!
And I think it's also because, obviously, I'm a fan of all of the movies here. There's not a single bad movie in this franchise, but obviously the first Evil Dead movie, it's good in my opinion. But Evil Dead 2, and again, I'll talk about this in just a second here, builds up Ash as such an interesting character that you're so invested in, that when he automatically gets thrown into a whole new world where people are looking up to him to save them, you automatically become very, very interested in how this is all going to play out. So obviously it's riding on a lot of story from Evil Dead 2, but again, I think they do a great job of just building this medieval world and having you so invested in Ash already that you're automatically like, whatever happens, I'm going to be interested in it because I care so much about Ash. That aside though, this movie also feels like the biggest spectacle of them all in the best way possible. It seems like Sam Raimi just got to do whatever the hell he wanted for however long this movie is, and I love that. It definitely feels a lot less one-on-one zombie-y and more grand scale army versus army, but that's why it's called Army of Darkness, because you're building up from these first two movies, and again, I think it works only because we're so invested from the first two movies doing an amazing job laying the groundwork. But with that being said, my favorite movie in the Evil Dead franchise is Evil Dead 2 at a 9 out of 10. In my opinion, this is easily the stupidest, most campy movie of the entire franchise, both on a technical camera level, but also just the makeup and individual scenes. It's so stupidly fantastical, but grounded at the same time. Also, Sam Raimi behind this camera felt like the most Sam Raimi. It felt like Spider-Man 2 in the sense that you have Spider-Man 1 where you set up your baseline for the character, which is the Evil Dead in my opinion. And then in Spider-Man 2, aka Evil Dead 2, you just go full on style in my opinion. And I love the way that Sam Raimi just boom, boom, boom. He just throws it all in. An Army of Darkness, again, increases the scale by a trillion, but Evil Dead 2 has a great middle ground of you're keeping the grounded side of the story from the first movie, but you're also excelling what you kind of want to push forward in that third movie. And that brings me to my final point about Evil Dead 2, which is it easily has the best ending of an individual movie in this series. And honestly, it's one of my favorite movie endings of all time. But guys, that's it for my ranking of the 5 movies in the Evil Dead franchise. Like I said in the beginning of this video, let me know your ranking for all 5 of these movies in the comments down below. I'm really interested to see all of your guys' rankings. But again, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.